News Talk 920 KVEC. Welcome back. Dr. Karen Kroll will be here at 5:05. Meanwhile, we continue with vinyl record historian Gary J. Freiberg. We're talking about vinyl records and the preservation of vinyl records. Also, a little bit about the evolution of album cover art. Gary, as we come back to you before the news break, we were talking about is Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. Whipped Cream and Other Delights is the #2 most popular album cover.
Yes, and
what's the story with the woman? You said you interviewed her.
Yeah, she lives up in Washington. Dolores Erickson, very, very nice. I'm so proud. I have an autographed album from her that she said, yeah, it's one of my possessions in my little nerdy world. But yeah, she just as I said, she was a Ford agency model, and she got the call and did the shoot in an afternoon, and then went home and had to hide the pictures.
Any hesitation for her to do it?
I don't suppose so. She really didn't know what she was getting into when she went out there. But in the name of art,
sure,
models and actors will do most anything. So,
and I think almost anybody can guess the #1 most popular album cover of all time.
Yes.
Is
Sgt. Pepper, and you can see what happens here. This is really the pivot. Sgt. Pepper is the pivot in so many ways, musically, of course, but also from the visual point. Everything else that we were looking at that we've seen so far, it's pretty much people are posed, and here's the picture of the different artists. You can see with Sgt. Pepper, of course, there was all kinds of unknowns on here where people would sit down and figure out who the people are. What's the message here? Why is there a hand above Paul? Does this mean that Paul is dead? There was all of this stuff. And then there was this insert, and the insert that had the cutout was really revolutionary. That had not happened before. And
it was like a bonus feature.
It was a bonus feature, and that had not happened before. So what happens after this is album cover art goes off in a completely new direction.
I just read a biography of Paul McCartney, and originally John Lennon wanted Adolf Hitler and Jesus Christ on the cover, and the attorney said no. They thought it was too inflammatory.
Well, they did have a lot of control back then. The Beatles had on one of their album covers, known as the Butcher cover, had themselves covered with butcher smocks, and they pulled that the minute that it hit the United States.
Gary J. Freiberg, vinyl record historian on the Dave Congleton Show. And what else about Alex Steinweiss should we? Steinweiss, excuse me. What else about Alex Steinweiss should we mention?
Well, Alex Steinweiss is really a key person. As I said earlier, he was the person that first came out with album cover art. He had a graphics background, dealing a lot with German posters, and had done work for the government, other agencies before he was hired by Columbia. But these are Steinweiss covers, and it's very, very rare that an album cover artist was able to sign their work. But every Steinweiss cover has his name in the corner here to signify it. And then this font, this little scrolly font, whatever, with all the loops on it, is known as the Steinweiss font. And he, again, not using photography, but using illustration. And all of these, it's pretty easy once you know the art form to be able to pick out an Alex Steinweiss cover with the font.
Is there a link between cover and sales? People, I guess so, with the whipped cream one. That probably was in part because of the cover.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's the whole purpose of every cover that is out there, still even today, is to get the listener's attention, to get them to hold it and to pick it up and go turn it over and give them more consideration about purchasing the cover.
But to what extent was cover art any kind of cultural influence, cultural barometer?
Yes. It certainly reflected cultural values, fashion, lifestyles, politics, racial views. I think in discussing this, it's important, along with Alex Steinweiss, that there have been other people along the way who were significant album cover artists. This was a two-man team known as Hypnosis, and they did a lot of work with 10cc and other groups, but they had a definite style of album cover art. Again, once we came to Sgt. Pepper, anything was a go. Anything to be able to get the viewer's attention. This Joel Brodsky is a photograph that he took, and we can see that
Tom Waits.
Yes, and we can see that the depiction, when you just now asked, did it affect sales? You can see they have a scantily dressed woman on the cover. It makes you stop and go, what is he doing? What's going on there? And in the meanwhile, then you've picked up the cover and perhaps start to consider to buy it.
This is the Tom Waits album, Small Change.
Yes, yeah. And other people, Vargas, who was the Playboy artist.
That's the Cars.
Yes. Yeah. But with a famous Vargas drawing, there were other.
But I knew that because I recognized the drawing. I knew that was the car. I don't see it on the album cover. I just was able to recognize it because I remember that cover being with the Cars.
And that's one of the things. Perhaps if it was a different cover, this with the reclining woman, who's also kind of scantily dressed, it may not have affected your memory. Same way when we were looking at the whipped cream and other delights. Completely unrelated to the music, but it creates an image, and for a commercial marketing purpose. Still today, that's what cover art is all about.
Yeah, but what about cultural change? What about cultural influence?
Well, that is really a broad topic. Let me just reach over.
Gary J. Freiberg on the Dave Congleton Show. We're talking about vinyl records and vinyl record preservation. He's brought in some of his record covers with him today. We're having a conversation on the radio, but we're also going to be recording this for YouTube. So you can check that out early next week and see some of these particular record covers that we've been discussing.
I think that with the cultural influence, that it reflected and it also led. I think that it did both things. Here is an artist depiction. It's called The Family All Together. And it's showing the lifestyles of, this is early, I'm looking back here for a date, but my knowledge tells me that it's in early 60s.
And that looks like something out of Norman Rockwell.
Yes, and that's a very, very good point. He was another artist that did select. He did a few album covers.
Really? Norman Rockwell did album covers?
Norman Rockwell.
Really?
And Andy Warhol, of course, did the Stones cover. But yes, but this is showing what life is supposed to be like in the typical American home. Wife is in a nice dress, dad's sitting there with his pipe, and the kids are playing nicely, dressed nicely. And here's the family all together. And then here's how we're supposed to be for teenagers in love with Teresa Brewer. And, the depiction of the culture at that time, the teenagers are looking up at her admiringly with real respect. And she's, no tattoos, no piercing, a set of pearls.
And they're all white.
And they're all white, which is a very good point that I want to get to here in just a moment on how the racial views of America were depicted on album cover art. But it also helped lead the way for the different dance crazes. Here I'm holding an album, Ray Conniff, Dance the Bop. But once again, it's showing the culture of the time with the kind of dress.
Cat says, how to dance the bop. Instruction booklet enclosed.
Yes. Yeah, and there were a lot of things. There's recordings on how to hypnotize people, how to be a better stenographer. I have one on how to be a better bowler, and that one I've always figured out. Wondered you put that on, you set up the furniture or whatever. Yeah. But here's also leading Chubby Checker with the
twist,
with a twist, which of course was just used, but it was also instructional. Here's Debbie Drake, Feel Good, Look Good, perhaps one of the very first exercise records. So when we're talking about cultural influence, it really made a big difference. And you can see here, not only do we see an idea of the fashion, but we also get an idea of the impact.
As you go through these, are these worth money?
I have to answer you with two breaths. Some are.
Right.
If we take a look at this Hawaiian Eye one with Connie Stevens, 1959, yes, to the person who is perhaps interested in classic TV, this is something that is really very, very rare.
Right.
But I think monetary value is certainly a consideration. But once again, as I was saying earlier, it's a preservation of our history. I'm not sure where else can we see a picture like this Hawaiian Eye with Connie Stevens and the other actors on it. Again, we're getting a feel of what the era was like.
So if I wanted to know how much a record cover might worth, is there a website? to go to? Is there a book to get?
Yeah, there's two primary publishers that issue guides on how to know what your records are worth. And of course, there are variables depending on condition, if there's pen markings, if there's ring wear. This cover is in very, very good condition. We're looking at the Hawaiian Eye cover. There's no ring wear. There's no one has written on it. The corners are in good shape. So this is very good. But there's two primary publishers. Goldmine has a book for record and prices, and also another publisher is Jerry Osborne, who does rockin' records, and they will give different values of mint, near mint, or very good condition, because records naturally have a range of condition that they're in.
Gary J. Freiberg is on the Dave Congleton Show. Who did that song? What condition, my condition? Who did that? What condition, my condition was in?
It was the Kenny Rogers group.
Yeah.
The
New edition, was it?
Yeah, first edition.
First edition.
Yeah.
All right. We'll be back for a final segment with vinyl record historian Gary J. Freiberg. This is News Talk 920 KVEC.